So this is just after 10 minutes after 9 UK local time on Sunday, 28th of March 2021, and it's 21:10 hours GMT. Sunday, the 28th of March 2021. Now we start with an item from the online or the Daily Telegraph about a woman who is now 19 and who lived in Brighton in southeast of London, southeast of the of England region. And what's her name? Her name is Berphy, Berphy, Berphy Kudi, Kudi, who celebrated over 6 days, celebrated her 18th birthday in December 2019. And she did that for non-stop 6 days. After leaving her flat with a 20-month-old child, Asiya, which is spelled Asiah, and that child was starving for 6 days. Well, Berphy Kudi traveled across England and partied, celebrating her 18th birthday. Now, the picture of Berphy Kudi shows that she is definitely of African origin, whether she is Somalian or Sudanese or from another kind of part of Africa is not stated or is not clear, but she is definitely of African origin. And the child dehydrated and contracted influenza before she died. Think about it. So we say, rest in peace, Asiya. And Berphy Kudi only spoke in the court to enter her guilty plea to manslaughter and gave her name. Kudi appeared at Lewes Crown Court and held her hands to her face after the charge of manslaughter was read to her. She was later seen wiping away tears. Now that description is stupid because there is no description of the child, how she struggled as she starved to death. No description as to the impact on that child. Now, why do they mention that Berphy Kudi was seen wiping away tears? What about the child? And I think that the charge of manslaughter is inappropriate. Berphy Kudi should have been charged with murder. Now, Brighton Council has now launched an inquiry into the circumstances. And we mentioned this also in the context of continuing discussing the brazen negligence of duty of care and duty of safeguarding children by Tower Hamlets Council in relation to the 4 schoolgirls, all of whom went to Syria between December 2014 and February 2015. Now, the behavior of local councils is, so crucial to the safety and well-being of people that they're supposed to safeguard. And this child, Asia, could not be more appropriate and more in need of help. Now, how did that happen? They're talking about the CCTV evidence showing that Berfi Kudi left her flat on the 5th of December 2019, and she never returned until 11th of December 2019, that is 6 days. Now, if the CCTV usage is of any relevance to the safeguarding and saving of the life of this child and similar people, then surely the CCTV control center in Brighton or East Sussex, wherever it was, should have been monitoring the kind of movement into the flat or out of the flat. And if there was no movement between the dates that they published in relation to the report on the Telegraph, Boris Graf, about the court case, if there was evidence that there was no movement for a significant time, then of course there should have been alarm bells raised and ringing, assuming, of course, that the particular local council, whatever it is called, East Sussex or Brighton, had kind of contacts with the 18-year-old Berfi Kudi, because she was obviously a mother of a 20-month-old child. And that length of time, over that length of time, she should have been on the books of social services, GP, and others. Now, what contacts existed between her and those agencies? They are not explained in the report in the Boris Graf, but there should have been. And it shows also that although the UK central government has got a statutory obligation imposed on local councils for safeguarding children, there doesn't exist any monitoring of the compliance or the level of compliance with the safeguarding children duties. Well, that doesn't exist as far as can be established by observing the behavior of the council concerned or all the councils externally, say from this point of view, that is, we are looking at this from the external kind of angle. And we're doing this without having access to any files, any database, any archived kind of communication or contents about this particular victim of, we should call, the murder by the council and the teenage mother. And why it is murder is easily advocated, because she knowingly, intentionally left that child, that infant, and she intentionally, knowingly, negligently stayed away from her while she, Berfi Kudi, indulged in God knows what excesses. 6 days of celebration must have included all kinds of abuses and abusive behavior to herself, and indulgences in all kinds of things that cannot be described, because we haven't read the details of what she did over the 6 days and what criteria should be applied to assess the vulgarity, the recklessness, the cruelty of this 18-year-old towards that infant that was murdered. It wasn't like she didn't know or that she was kind of prevented from returning home to the child. And that is not kind of answered or explained this in this particular report. And we go back to the role of the Hrs Council. Over many cases of negligence, recklessness, and cruelty to the people that it owed duties of care and safeguarding and other duties. And we can extrapolate from this behavior by Berfi Coody and include councils like Hamlets, Newham, and other councils. All the councils in England are, of course, given the same kind of set of duties by the legislation and by the arrangements that exist between the central government and local councils. So what we are saying is that that doesn't exist any significant monitoring or any monitoring at all of the behavior of these councils in relation to the duties to safeguard children, generally speaking. Now, when something like the kind of media and the anti-Islamic war propaganda heightens the tension around jihadis and radicalization and whatever in England, and we say that this particular phase of crusade was launched with Satan Rushdie and his satanic verses and other so-called literary work, which are completely exposed as totally, absolutely unentertaining and not really enjoyable by the ordinary standards. Satan Rushdie was launched as a kind of attack on the Muslims, and it is quite possible that the attack on the Muslim community generally across the world was funded by at least one or two Muslim countries that are Muslim in name but actually stooges and are themselves fascistic, and they wanted to kind of undermine other Muslims that might be democratically kind of opposing their fascist behavior and anti-Islamic behavior. So the whole jihadi thing and the radicalization thing, these are not given, these are not kind of established facts. What I'm saying is that these are issues that need to be thoroughly examined by all concerned seekers of the truth, not as an inquiry like set up by the academics or whatever, but really truth-seeking people who exist on a far higher level than the academies or the judicial inquirers in the sense of the Western kind of countries like the Levison inquiry, McPherson inquiry, Scarman inquiry, or the Hillingdon or Hillsborough inquiry, or the series of inquiries that took place about the Northern Irish situation. And one of the licensed law traders hired by one or two parts of the inquiry was, of course, Michael Mansfield, who was paid millions of pounds, according to various accounts, because that inquiry in Northern Ireland, or those series of inquiries in Northern Ireland and about Northern Ireland, went on for years. And judging by the rate that David Pennick charged the Manchester City Football Club over his retention by that football club to represent that football club in an appeal against a European Football Regulatory Authority ruling against the football club. David Pennick charged, regardless of the outcome of his retention, David Pennick charged the Manchester City Football Club at the rate of £20,000 per day. Now, the day is not 24 hours. The day is either 7 hours or 8 hours, not more than that. So calculated on that basis of that rate, Michael Mansfield, who I have spoken to only once in a chance kind of conversation I had with him while walking in Chancery Lane. And Michael Mansfield is, of course, a member of the licensed law traders kind of bureaucracy and list, who are on the list of very high earning kind of licensed law traders. But Michael Mansfield also has a propaganda image as radical, as a left-wing, as an almost socialist type of lawyer. But he's not any better than the other licensed law traders who operate at various levels of dishonesty and even distortion of their various claims to suit their image that they maintain, to haggle and bargain for higher and higher fees. As I said, licensed law traders, whether they work or whether they're retained by organizations or agencies outside of the court's bureaucracy and the formality of the courts, they get paid regardless of the outcome. That is the main thing. Anyone who doesn't understand the licensed law traders operation or the legal bureaucracy needs to take this very seriously, this point. This is like an impunity, like a license to tell lies and to license to be negligent, but getting the significant amount of money in the name of being licensed to trade as lawyers. There is only one man, I think from memory, of origin, who originated from what is now Bangladesh, who used to be East Pakistan, or I'm not recalling the exact date or the year when he arrived in the UK, but he did come from that part of the world. And his name was Saifuddin. Now, Saifuddin is not known to the UK Bangladeshis now, or most Bangladeshis even 20 or 30 years ago or 40 years ago. But Saifuddin became involved in a dispute with a firm of solicitors, or an individual solicitor called Sidney Mitchell, about 40 years ago or whatever, 30 years ago. It's not a recent kind of dispute. The Saifuddin became involved because the Sidney Mitchell, a licensed law trader, misrepresented him or lied about his case, or wasn't competent enough and was not dishonest enough, etc., etc. And from the accounts that I remember, I have not checked the actual document recently, but the account that I remember showed or referred to Saifuddin as not an, quote, educated or schooled person himself. And that was part of the problem, because he didn't understand the depravity and the lying by Sidney Mitchell, while still formally under instruction by Saifuddin. And at one stage of the appeal and counter appeal and whatever, this Saifuddin versus Sidney Mitchell passed through probably the first Sikh, Sikh, Sikh religion, that is, judge, Sikh judge, overhyped because of the fact that he was Sikh and fast Sikh or something, called Mota Singh, Mota, Mota Singh. Now, I have earlier, in the last 5 days or so, maybe in the last week, extensively referred to Mota Singh. And I have described him as one of the kind of classic, typical stooges and mental slaves. I don't personally know Mota Singh, but based on his kind of published reasoning against Saifuddin and for Sidney Mitchell, it is more than abundantly clear that he is a mental slave and also very much actively discernible as an anti-Muslim. So anyone who wants to talk about diversity has to understand all these factors at play. Only because Mota Singh was also an Asian, also an ethnic so-called minority in the demographic context, which distorts the whole picture of the UK, because the UK's population is less than most of the states in India. So for people from the subcontinent to be called minority in Britain or England is ludicrous beyond kind of description. And this is one of the inherent distortions in the linguistic narrative used by the racists and the racist bureaucracy. Anyway, back to Mota Singh. What Mota Singh did was precisely the purpose for his being displayed as a diversity exhibit by the racist bureaucracy of the English judiciary. I mean, I found, remember, I have been very actively engaged in diagnosing, in direct engagements that I've had with the members of the judiciary over a very long time, English judiciary. So there are, for example, there are Chinese origin people in the kind of licensed law trade and in the judiciary, tribunal members, etc. And they are habitually prone to be hostile to Muslim litigants that they are kind of assigned to adjudicate on. And the same applies to people of African origin. They're very hostile to Muslims and very hostile to people from the subcontinent. That is fact. Now, I haven't got any evidence, but by that I can extrapolate the reverse as well. That is to say that members of the judiciary or licensed law trade who are from the Asian, the main subcontinent, who sit on cases brought by or relating to people of African origin would be significantly hostile to those people. Now, that is the preliminary finding that I have based on all the evidence. And that actually shows the racists as the racists, and they have the diversity stooges as mental slaves to do that, and they create and maintain and operate the diversity and the hostility and the hostile kind of attitude shown against African litigants, subcontinental litigants, if you like. And the main kind of Western European white ones don't touch these cases because the outcome they want to, or the system, the bureaucracy, the judicial racists want to kind of produce is so starkly racist and against the litigants that they correctly think that they will be identified as being racist if they're set to adjudicate on these people, against these people. So back to Mata Singh. The Mata Singh was a corrupt stooge of the racists in the judiciary, in the bureaucracy. And Mata Singh was only the first one. There have been dozens of others, licensed law traders, appointed various tiers and various places, levels of the English judiciary. And all of those have been appointed correctly by their exploiters and appointers as mental slaves. And they have delivered the mental slavery outcome. And as I said, Sikh ones have been hostile to Muslims, Muslim litigants, and Muslim litigants have been considerably hostile to Hindu and Sikh ones. Generally, that is the general kind of purpose. And that means that all these judicial appointees have been used and have accepted themselves to be used to flout most of the obligations that the UK state is under and has been under and remains under, according to the various terms and clauses and conditions of literally thousands of international treaties and agreements and conventions and declarations. Now, this is the part of the statement that I'm making, which is very consistent in our broadcasts, because the facts are applicable and facts do apply. So, when this mother of the two girls, the two women, now it seems that one of the young women looks like she would be of mixed parentage. It is not described in the reports whether she is mixed parentage, but one of the two women, two sisters found dead, looks much lighter skinned than the other one. The other one is also slightly light skinned, but not quite as light skinned as to be confused with a white skinned person. And the mother looks like her, or in terms of pigmentation. And the mother, according to the Telegraph, the Boris Graph, to give it its correct name according to our vocabulary and our kind of lexicon and rhetoric, the mother has confirmed, in the interview she gave to Mishal Hussain on the BBC Radio 4 2 days ago, that the police did not take her or her partners or her families' concerns about the two daughters when those daughters were missing. And this has been the factual assertion by this mother in the wake of in the days following the events of the abduction and murder of Sarah Everard. And what the facts show is that is accurate in terms of the pattern. I mean, there was a man in the kind of west of England or somewhere near Bristol, I think. The Muslim man who was burned by a group of youths. Now, he was burned to death after a long campaign of harassment against him by a gang of youths near his home. And he complained to the police, and they didn't treat their complaint properly, and they didn't, of course, do anything to save him. And so therefore this mother, who is now on the record now talking to Mishal Hussain on the BBC Radio 4, is not exceptional. Her experience is not exceptional. That is the main kind of thread, main common experience of African parents, or parents of African Caribbean origin, or parents of Asian origin. When it comes to Muslim parents or parents of Muslim background, the indifference and the failure or the choice by the police to not act on serious communications about serious violence imminent, that is 100 times worse. And to take the case of the two doctor parents, I think they were of Christian faith, but they were from Pakistan, and they were attacked by the other doctors in the hospital in the area, Dharam, when they wanted to contribute and wanted to see their dying child. Because they were anxious about their dying child, they were treated as criminals, and police were called. And the police came and arrested the father. No hesitation. Can you imagine the complete distortion and perversion of facts there? It is very much like, or even worse than, the behavior of the police in Minneapolis in the USA, where George Floyd was suffocated to death by a policeman sitting on him, despite the fact that the victim was complaining that he couldn't breathe because he was being sat on by the killer policeman. So all of these are evidence, currently, contemporaneous, absolutely ongoing, practiced by the people who are supposed to safeguard and save people in serious need of help. Remember what we started with? We started with that case of this 18-year-old mother who herself behaved in a murderous way towards her 20-month-old child, Asiya. And at all levels of this serious violence being caused to the victims, the role of the local council and the social service, the social responsibility is paramount, absolutely central, including its role and its kind of access to the local police to get help for the child and seek the help and cooperation of the local police at the given time. So far in the report published by the Boris Kraft about this particular, as I call it, the murder of this child, Asiya, no reference has been made about the role of the police or the role of the social services prior to the eventual discovery of the fact that the child had died of starvation and other illnesses that she was caused during the 6 days of starvation. She had influenza and other illness, serious illnesses. Now, this actually takes us in another strand, another kind of extension of the discussion to what the social services are accountable to. For example, in the case of Tar Hamlers, not about these 4 schoolgirls from Bethnal Green School, but in the case of the Ian Micardo's School for Special Needs, Many allegations have been made to us by people who know the school or knew the school that many abuses took place at that school. School was for special needs children. So the criteria, the standard, the bar for kind of active watching and monitoring to make sure that no abuses took place was very high. And yet there was no evidence that any monitoring took place of the school's behavior. In fact, one of the convicted racist killers, one of the convicted racist killers of the Bangladeshi man, Shiblu Rahman, was after serving the limited jail sentence for the racist killing of Shiblu Rahman, this killer was given a job by that school. Secondly, this killer was promoted by the Tower Hamlets Council as a very good neighbor to their neighbors. So therefore, there was no mention of the fact that he was a convicted racist killer. And the racist killing took place not far from the site of the Jan Mikado School in the Bow area in Tower Hamlets. And all the facts that relate to this series of events have been recounted many times. And despite the fact that there was a meeting concerning the school and the employment of the convicted racist killer Ian Devlin, the meeting took place in June 2016 at the Micro Business Center in the Greater Egg Street, which is off the Hanbury Street, which itself is off the Brick Lane. That meeting took place during the month of Ramadan in June 2016. And the organizers of the meeting included mainly people from the Bangladeshi community, including a former councillor called Abbasuddin Ali Salal, who appeared to be running the show, that is to say, calling speakers, etc., etc. That meeting was kind of plagued by the idiotic allowance of John Beeks, the elected mayor of Tower Hamlets, who had done nothing to account for the council's complicity with the promotion of the convicted racist killer Ian Devlin. And this Beeks was given the main platform. So there is such absolute brazen lack of awareness, knowledge on the part of so many, quote, leaders in the community, that first of all, on the evidence of their behavior, they are no leaders, so they should not be called leaders. They should be referred to by their actual kind of activities. And the actual activities is that they are self-serving abusers of the presence of the Bangladeshi community in a significant number in the electorate. I have spoken before a few times about the Bethnal Green City Challenge. Initially, I called it the Spitalfield City Channel, which was actually my awareness about the location, not the actual area. When I checked the references again, I found that it was actually called the Bethnal Green City Challenge. Now, Bethnal Green City Challenge was established under the kind of tenure of Michael Heseltine as the Environment Secretary in John Major's cabinet. And Michael Heseltine was very wrong to set up these city challenges, not just in Bethnal Green, but in the Northeast and other places. Because that was done by ignoring the corruption of the local councils and the corruption in the local communities or the members aligned with the local council crooks. Now, when the councils are funded under schemes like this, this Spitalfields area, but it's the Bethnal Green actually, the constituency area, let's say, half of the constituency area. The money was given to the local council and council-related stooges and operatives, most of whom were corrupt. And the legacy of the Bethnal Green City Challenge doesn't exist. Except in some cases, in the legacies of certain individuals who were wrongly given money for setting up restaurants and who managed to kind of abuse the existence of certain local councillors who were persuaded for their own interests to approve grants of hundreds of thousands of pounds to a number of bogus individuals who had no record of running businesses. Secondly, who had no record of being accountable to the local community. And thirdly, for 30 years now, almost, those have not contributed anything to the local community, either in terms of creating jobs or sustaining jobs for anyone other than themselves and their families. So this is Tower Hamlets. This is Tower Hamlets looked at from all the angles. Tower Hamlets Council, Tower Hamlets bureaucracy, that is absolutely not only not kind of engaged in doing its duty to safeguard the children, like these 4 girls, but is actually used as a machine for furthering and maintaining corruption and crooks in business. I wrote any number of faxes because we're talking about the years of the faxes, quite significantly long before the appearance or availability of email system. So I sent any number of original letters by faxes, all of them, to the Bethnal Green City Challenge. And my reason for writing to them was connected with the campaign I was launched. One of the campaigns, and the particular campaign I was running at the time in E14 around the racist attacks on Bangladeshi children in the Manchester Road Secondary School. There was no reply, there was no acknowledgement, there was no reason for lack of engagement by the Bethnal Green City Challenge. And the theme of my inquiries and the communications was not different from the theme that I applied and I'm applying now to campaigns and activities throughout. And in all of these, one of the main central beneficiaries, if you like, in terms of the outcome of my campaigns is Bangladeshi people, other people, Indian, Pakistani, Afro-Caribbean, African, and other non-European people Those also benefit, but essentially, the absolutely consistent running theme is to help the Bangladeshis because of the evidence of their being in need of help, not because I have any particular bias against other people and for the Bangladeshis. The plain fact is and has been that in the Bangladeshi community, the level of need is very high. And this is one of the evidential findings that I am using in arguing that migration is not an answer to solving the problem of poverty in the countries of origin. A theme I advocated in January 1992 when I wrote and presented the particular edition of the slot SLOT that followed the 7 o'clock UK time main news bulletin on Channel 4, in which I said to the United Nations, the Western countries, and especially John Major, to address the poverty in the originating countries from where the migrants and the asylum seekers come. I've discussed in detail this, so you can look up the actual contents of what I've said about this so far. So the poverty that drives so many people from the African and Asian continents, and the poverty which is supposed to be kind of solved, the poverty problem solved by the individual migrants, is never solved when they reach the migration or reach the migration destination. For example, this week's rhetoric by the Boris Johnson-fronted cabal against migrants and asylum seekers is not new, but it is continuing the assault on the rights of the human rights of the people called migrants or asylum seekers. Fronted by Priti Patel, has shown her as a fascist of the Nazi party's kind of framework, because she has announced severe penalties against migrants and also against asylum seekers, etc., etc. Now, migrants, asylum seekers, refugees fall into the category of protected people fleeing persecution, hunger, famine, massacre, whatever, according to the international treaties of which the UK remains actively signed up to. Now, despite all of that, obligations, these are legal, international legal obligations and duties. The UK regime continues to flout those duties. Not only that, there is no opposition from the opposition party. And that is the bigger crime, because the members of parliament in the UK House of Commons, which is the main part of the parliament or the main component, because that's where the debates take place and the definitive kind of votes take place. The members of parliament in the opposition Labour Party, which is numerically the main biggest party after the Conservatives, has been, as I've been saying, politically killed by its dead leader. So he's spreading the infection of political death among the ranks of the Labour Party MPs that are still there in the House of Commons. No issue No issue, however important and urgent, has been the topic of any memorable even sentence by any of the Labour Party MPs, including the severe, severe scandal and the fact and the around the fact of the abduction and possible rape. I keep saying possible rape because I think the media are hiding this. I mean, this woman who was murdered could not have been murdered if she had not been raped and sexually abused after being abducted. So all these scandals, including the very serious number of avoidable deaths by the COVID-19 because of the negligent and cruel behavior by Boris Johnson and the cabal he fronts, there is no noticeable even mention of any of this by Keir Starmer or any Labour Party MPs. What they do make is ritualistic references to these events, not serious fundamental references to these tragedies and crimes by the current government and the agencies. And I think that this is the context, that there is no culture in the UK today and has not been for many years that is compatible with the needs of the most vulnerable. It affects the four girls from the Bethnal Green School, and it affects the two sisters that were murdered. And according to her parent, police were seen taking selfies next to the bodies of the murdered sisters, according to the mother talking to Michelle Hussein. So there is a void, there is an emptiness. Whatever posts the diversity careerists are given, they are given to exploit the actual injustice that are inflicted on and suffered by the main part of the demography in whose name the diversity displays are installed. So Mota Singh, although he is an Asian, was a traitor to the main rights of the Asian community in the context of the racism, centuries old racism of the judicial bureaucracy. And when it comes to license law traders kind of individually operating as license holders, there is no forum where they are victims of their negligence can turn to get justice against their misconduct. One-to-one, the licensed law traders, by whom in this context I refer to Bangladeshi, Indian and Pakistani origin kind of licensed law traders. If a Bangladeshi or Indian or Pakistani litigant has to approach them for the simple reason of the procedural formalities to be met, then 99% of the cases are bound to result in the litigant being let down and betrayed. So there are two reasons. One is that most of the Pakistani, Indian and Bangladeshi origin or ID licensed law traders are not genuinely kind of, if you like, schooled members of the various law trading schools and colleges that run courses in this country, prior to the successful students then being given the license by the license giver, law trader license giver, for example. In the case of soul cheaters or solicitors, soul cheaters is what I call by their conduct, but otherwise they're called solicitors. Solicitors are given the license by the Law Society of England and Wales, and the barristers are given their license by the 4 barristers kind of outfits. 2 Gray's Inn and Lincoln's Inn, and the other 2 are Inner Temple and Middle Temple. I was actually recommended as a practicing barrister or as a potential practice certificate holder, license holder, barrister in 1973. But I got involved in a big row with a racist administrator at the Lincoln's Inn in 1973. So because of the row, she refused to hand over the license certificate to me. So therefore, I didn't kind of become a licensed barrister, but I was, according to the rules and requirements in practice in force at the time. Because 4 barristers actually recommended me according to the leader of their group. But this was denied by the administration at Lincoln's Inn when I went to collect my certificate. And the details of my correspondence and my advocacy of my rights against her lying are extensive, as you can imagine. Now, the licensed law trade has got no real auditing for its members or its licensing kind of 4 licensing colleges or institutes like Lincoln's Inn and Gray's Inn or Inner Temple and Middle Temple. And the same applies to the licensed law traders who sit as judges or tribunal chairs or tribunal judges. And it covers all the judges in the judiciary of all levels. So it's not just Saifuddin who was victimized by Mota Singh and others. Most litigants who have been let down, lied to and lied about, and as a result lost huge amounts in many respects because of the lying by the licensed law traders. I mean, over the years, let's say the last 70 years, and I'm talking about the 70 years in relation to the August 1947, there is a lot of, literally hundreds of thousands of people from the subcontinent, consisting of the 3 countries, India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, have migrated to this country. And absolutely, the majority of them are let down by the system, by the judges, the judiciary, the police, and the schools, the government, central government, anywhere, which is the main reason for my arguing that migration not only doesn't solve the problem of poverty, but it aggravates poverty in unimaginable way, and it is in a way that the people in the subcontinent, still in the subcontinent, hoping to migrate, have no idea about. And to get everyone, potential migrant or asylum seeker, to understand the sheer horrible extent of the racism that is inflicted on the people who are migrants or asylum seekers. I mean, this cannot be explained. I mean, there is not enough time to convey this one-to-one to these potential migrants or asylum seekers. So I argued in January 1992 in my program on Channel 4 television that I wrote and presented that comprehensive action and real action should be taken in those countries to solve the problems which the potential migrants and asylum seekers try to escape or solve by escaping as migrants. So that actually includes and requires and raises the first important question on the evidence, not in my view only, on the evidence, that the rule of law must be established in those countries. The rule of law and due process in a way that is real and in a way that doesn't depend on the person having lots of money to give to the local equivalents of the licensed law traders or touts. And the judicial process is real, rigorous, and of highest possible standard and of highest possible independence. Now, the judicial bureaucracies in India, for example, in Bangladesh and Pakistan, are not independent. They're coward, and they're coward means they are kind of overcome. COWERED, not COWARD, although that too applies. The judges, the local so-called barristers, and they are kind of juniors, if you like, are not independent of the state, independent of the political parties, and the police are corrupt in those three countries, very corrupt. So literally millions of people from India and Pakistan and Bangladesh, for example, are absolutely kind of going through hell, a nightmare, because of the frustration that they can't get to migrate to any countries that they prefer to go to and settle. So there is an ongoing nightmare ongoing in the three countries without any attention being focused on those hundreds of millions of people, victims of injustice, trapped in internal domestic kind of lack of justice and lack of fairness and lack of access to kind of due process. There is no concern for those people. Now, those people are many times more than 3 million Hong Kong people that Boris Johnson is quite happy to let in. And Priti Patel is quite happy to let in because of the current temporary kind of row with Chinese, not because of the particular high regard for human rights of the Hong Kong people, not at all. But they're prepared to use the people of Hong Kong who have been demonstrating against the mainland China as weapons of war or propaganda and diplomatic kind of battle against the Chinese and the business competition and whatever. And again, the Hong Kong people are being exploited, but they think they're being recognized and honored. That is the extent of the brainwashing that works. And the topical reference to the Uyghurs by some of the most anti-Muslim British conservative politicians. They hate the Muslims, and suddenly they've become fond of referring to the Uyghurs, who are the Muslims, being exploited and kind of massacred and raped, brutalized by the Chinese Huns. So the recognition of the existence of these things, violations and crimes against the Uyghurs, is not an honest genuine concern for the rights of the people, let alone any interest in letting them find freedom from these massacres and rapes and other attacks by the Huns. It is to use them as a tool, as a kind of rhetorical reference point, not even relating to any individual Uyghur victims, but as a collective brand to be waved against China by the British, working with the regime of Narendra Modi in India on the one hand, and the American establishment on the other. Absolutely untruthful, dishonest, and nothing to do with the rights of the victims who are Muslims, and nothing to do with the rule of law, nothing to do with actually solving the problem underlying the need for migration. So, migration is not a solution. And once people get to the destinations, ordinary people, that is not multi-billionaires, the dream is shattered and the life is completely overturned, and they cannot regain even the previous status back home. They can't go there. It's too expensive. They sold, most of the times, they have sold all their material possessions in order to fund the journey. Half of the journeys are never completed. And many of them die in the process of reaching the place, destination of the migration. So the Bangladeshis in this country, how did the Bangladeshis in the UK become identifiable as a significant political group among the migrants? How did they do that? Think about that. It's not as simple as that, as obvious as that. Because compared to the UK Bangladeshis, who are demographically much less than the numbers of Pakistanis or, well, Indians, let's say. And yet the Bangladeshis in the UK have got a significant profile as a group, identifiable group. Not as an identifiable group as an extension of any political party in Bangladesh itself. Although among the demography, the Bangladeshi population in the UK, there are many stooges and agents and spies operating on behalf of the many, at least 2 or 3 main political groups in Bangladesh. That is true. But the actual profile of the UK Bangladeshis as an independent entity is nothing to do with those stooges and spies. In fact, that profile is despite the operation of those stooges and spies and agents of the Bangladeshi political parties and groups. And if you look at the evidence shows that the only reason why that profile exists is because of our movement, our campaign, and because of the insights and the advocacy by me over 5 decades. And I'm going to substantiate this particular version of the statement of the facts by referring to these 4 girls. Nobody else is speaking about Shamima Begum and the other 3 girls in the context of their childhood and their being neglected by Townless Council, except me and our campaign. When we started, the others followed, but they are not anywhere near coming anywhere near what we are saying. So on every occasion, every single event over the last, let's say, 50 years, in the UK, the cause of the UK Bangladeshis has been advocated by me physically and, of course, intellectually. And I have done that despite the fact that all the other stooges and spies and agents have, of course, not done this. In fact, they have secretly kind of propagated against this defense of the UK Bangladeshis against the racists and other violators and attackers. So if you look at the history of the last 50 years, starting the main event, which was the 2nd of December 1972, 73, when the Sunday Times launched the attack on the Bangladeshi Siloti-speaking people in Brick Lane. It may have caused some to think that it was just an attack on the Brick Lane part of the population of Bangladeshi origin, but it wasn't. It was an attack on the whole of the UK Bangladeshis, with mainly Siloti speakers in December 1973 in the main towns and main centers and conurbations. I was the one who stood up. And to this day, none of those agents and spies has mentioned the Sunday Times. It's a giveaway because they know that they have not done anything. Not only that, they have actually colluded with the attackers of the Bangladeshis, on the Bangladeshis. And it is not a hypothesis. They held a gathering in the Toynbee Hall to support the Sunday Times and its sources and to give explanation as to why the Sunday Times attacked us. And that meeting we effectively, successfully disrupted. But that was the evidence when these spies and agents and stooges and coconuts actually tried to justify the Sunday Times attack. So these are the people that actually attacked the very people, the very community that had supported the 1971 Bangladesh. I mean, obviously supported. It wasn't taking physical part from London or UK, but supported the idea, the cause for the 1971 war for independent Bangladesh that after it began. And remember I said about a reference by Kenneth Leach during the memorial meeting about Tasadduk Ahmad, that it was Tasadduk Ahmad who conceived of the idea of Bangladesh from Brick Lane. That was a very big claim that Kenneth Leach made. So I tried to have a meeting with him in order to establish the exact date, exact events, which he was claiming would show that Tasadduk Ahmad was the one who created the idea of Bangladesh in Brick Lane. No other independent or verifiable source has said the similar thing. But it has been said that Tasadduk Ahmad was very much a point of contact in the years mainly during the 1960s, which was the decade before the 1971 War of Independence, which was after the event recognized as the War of Independence. There was no international law, or there was no international law compliant democratic mandate sought or given by the democracy, by the population in the former East Pakistan, giving mandate to anyone to declare any war or anything. But there was a conflict that was turned into a conflagration during March 1971. And that conflagration was caused by the conflict between the Pakistan army and people still not fully identified. The Pakistan army is identified, but the people on the side of the independent Bangladesh are not fully identified. So while Bangladesh, officially the Bangladesh state has been kind of celebrating 50th year, even the state has not got a list of the people who acted on the mandate, on a democratic international law compliant mandate to declare any war. And the fact that there was a prosecution in the late 1960s of a number of individuals by the then Pakistan government, alleging that these individuals had committed treason, plotted to secede East Pakistan from the Federation of Pakistan. It was denied by the accused and also by Thomas Williams, the so-called British QC, who symbolically associated himself with the accused. But the importance of that is because there is no mandate, international law compliant mandate, the people in today's Pakistan are blaming one another for the various defects and claiming credit for various achievements. So, on the one hand, the remaining Pakistan, that is what is called today called Pakistan, as a state, continues to fail its obligations owed to the victims, the civilian victims. There was no kind of Bangladesh army officially operating publicly in the then East Pakistan at all. So it was the civilians who were targeted by the official Pakistan army for assaults and rapes and massacres. Now the Pakistan army was completely, absolutely out of order for doing that. And the Pakistan army and the Pakistan government since 1971 have owed the duty to explain, let alone justify, why they did what they did. And as I have said, Imran Khan should have started on the 25th of March, 3 days ago, by beginning to pay compensation to each and every one of the known identifiable victims, civilian victims of the crimes committed against them by the Pakistan army. Because no one was a member of any army. No, none of the civilians was a member of the army, as far as the records showed and records could show. What later has been claimed as being the guerrilla warfare, by definition, was done in secret. So it wasn't done with the official kind of approval of any public civilians. And because it wasn't done in that way, it was done surreptitiously. It didn't engage with all the or the most of the people who were not aware, unless they knew privately that something was going on, that this was going on. So the people who are claiming credit for Bangladesh have to prove that they are the ones who did the hard slog. And they did that constitutionally by complying with the international rules and regulations. International meaning international, not just kind of exhibited in Bangladesh with the word international. So the people who are opposed to the ruling or controlling party or group are not being attacked because of evidence against them, but because it has been created as a almost settled claim that the controlling party or group did the work and did fight for the liberation of Bangladesh, and the opposition political party or parties didn't. Now that has not been settled. And that needs to be settled, not because of any outside elements, but any number of Bangladeshis out of hundreds of millions, any proportion of Bangladeshis are being completely bogusly and falsely, massively disenfranchised by smear. That is nothing to do with the actualities of what happened in 71, but because that kind of smear suits the purpose, the political purpose of the particular smearers and their agents. So these are serious issues, regardless of which party or parties are in control at the given time in Bangladesh over the last 50 years. Making claims about political opponents and accusing them of completely made up kind of wrongs is not confined to one or two or three or four or five people. It is being labeled and has been labeled over the last 50 years against millions of people. This is unprecedented, and it's not in accordance with the international law or the rules of due process or anything. So that's the situation in Bangladesh, and that has been kind of pumped through the agents into the communities in areas like the UK, where the UK Bangladeshis are an independent demographic and political entity, because Bangladeshis are only by origin or by descent. Bangladeshis in the UK are not related to Bangladesh by nationality. Most of them are not. Remember the difference. Although even the likes of Shamima Begum, born citizens of the UK, are stupidly and regularly confused with people of Bangladesh nationality. Shamima Begum and her three friends, as far as we know at this time, if what we are about to say or I'm about to say is factually incorrect, then by all means, any viewer is entitled to give me a correct description in a direct message by Twitter. Shamima Begum and her three friends are all British nationals by birth. They have connections with Bangladesh, but they're not Bangladesh nationals. And the nationality entitlements that they exercise and they're entitled to exercise and they have the right to exercise are those pertaining to British nationals by birth. And yet Shamima Begum has been readily identified by this son of a Pakistani-born, Pakistani origin bus driver, Sajid Javid. He and his agents and propagandists wrongly said that after he, Sajid Javid, robbed Shamima Begum of her citizenship, she could then be sent to Bangladesh. I mean, the extent of the depravity of that idiocy on the part of Sajid Javid cannot be explained, stated in words. It is too much, too wrong, too untrue, too ignorant, too idiotic, and too illegal. Shamima Begum is not a national of Bangladesh, never has been. I mean, she has the right to have Bangladeshi nationals as her parents or as her relations or as her grandparents or cousins or whatever. That does not make her a Bangladeshi national. And secondly, Bangladesh or any other country in a similar kind of treatment by the UK Home Secretary has no duties to compensate a victim of the British Home Office. No duties at all. It is the British Home Office that has committed the crime of robbing a British national of her British nationality acquired by birth. So the behavior of Tar Hamlets Council during those years, as I said, from October 2010, when they were about 10 years old, up to the time that they were reported to have all arrived in Turkey or through Turkey into Syria. So by February 2015, they were about 15 and a half or whatever. They were very close, they are very close contemporaries, I mean, in terms of chronological years and age. Whatever the exact dates of birth of these girls, 4 of these girls, all of them were in very serious need of help. The help was not withheld from them because of any money or resources constraints that the local council, Tar Hamlets Council, which had the duty to them, suffered from on that count. Because when the UK central government gives a particular duty like that, safeguarding children's duty, to a local council or parish equivalent council, whatever the name is, it also helps fund that service. So, and this presupposes dozens of, if you like, scenarios. The scenarios requiring the intervention of the local council to safeguard the children in danger. So, one of the first questions that we have been asking, and we have been asking it exclusively, originally, of Tar Hamlets Council is this: what safeguarding activities to safeguard these 4 girls did Tar Hamlets Council take at all relevant times? Publish the answer to this question we have been saying. Now, if they do publish, then we can see what action they took and to what extent their actions actually helped or would have helped these children. At what stage of their needing serious help. Now, Tar Hamlets Council, as we have been posting on the Twitter today, is fronted currently by a proven kind of racist who has lied against the UK Bangladeshis, Tar Hamlets based Bangladeshis, not about Bangladesh political party or anything, but UK Bangladeshis. For example, in September 2013, Remember, that was the year before. September, October, November, December, January, February, March, April, May. 8 months before, actually exactly 8 months before the 22nd of May 2014 so-called election for mayor, in which Beeks was a candidate. Now, on the 22nd, I think, of September 2013, a statement by Beeks was reported. I'm not looking at the video, so I'm saying reported. That is to say, I'm not saying that he said it. I'm saying it was reported. So it may have been his words, or it may have been paraphrased based on his words to the BBC. I'm being absolutely accurate factually. So he was reported to have said, that is John Beeks, words to the effect that most of the policies of the Tower Hamlets Council at that time, up to that time, in the context of the political structure or administrative structure of the Tower Hamlets Council as the things stood at that time in September 2013. Big said that all the policies, or all the main policies, or all the main policy considerations in relation to delivering resources to any part of the borough, all the policies were dominated by a bias in favor of the Bangladeshis, in the words of the Tower Hamlets borough, to the exclusion, in effect, of the non-Bangladeshis, including the mainly white population in the democracy, in the demography. That's what Don Beeks was reported to have said. In other words, what he was saying was that because the mayor in post at the time, the executive mayor, was Lutfur Rahman of Bangladeshi origin, he was prioritizing those areas where, in the words on the electorate, the Bangladeshis were the largest or larger or significant numerical presence than other people. By saying that, he was actually telling the non-Bangladeshis or anti-Bangladeshis, and definitely the majority of the white people in the electorate in Tower Hamlets, that he was the one who was going to give them, the white ones and the non-Bangladeshis, the benefits of the various services, etc., that they were being denied by Lutfur Rahman, who was focusing on helping the Bangladeshi parts or Bangladeshi populated parts in Tower Hamlets. I said right from the beginning in September 2023 that Beeks was lying. And I said that, which I am saying again, Lutfur Rahman never favored the Bangladeshis. That may come as a surprise, but that is true. And the reason is even more damning for Lutfur Rahman than it may appear. Lutfur Rahman dishonestly spread the lie and the line that he was helping people because of their being Bangladeshis or Muslims, but he was not doing any such thing. He was creating a vote bank that would give him the maximum votes and he could get re-elected. So he would have given this same type of benefit if the particular areas, instead of having most Bangladeshis as voters, those particular areas had most white people or non-Bangladeshis as voters. And the other reason is that he had connections with touts that had got enlisted by him around his so-called incumbency in the post of mayors connected with the election of October 2010. So Lutfur Rahman was not doing any favor for Bangladeshis. He was harvesting votes for himself by falsely giving the impression that the Bangladeshis were being given special help by him, because of him. And this actually corresponds with the other lies that were perpetrated for him by Shamsul Haq and Paula Baroness Uddin. The maximum damage to the cause of the Bangladeshis in the UK has been caused by Lutfur Rahman. And we shall give chapter and verse, item by item, again in due course. This is just a topical summary of the update. So what has happened in the 6 calendar years that Lutfur Rahman was in post was that he didn't take any action to protect these children, these 4 girls, and he didn't take any action to protect the victims of gang violence, including the teenage boy from Langdon Park School, Ajmal Ahmad. And as I have said many times, the effort I made to establish the facts from Ohid Ahmad, who was in place of the community safety member of the bogus cabinet of Lutfur Rahman's. And I asked him pointed question about what the Lutfur Rahman regime had done to safeguard children like the victim of the Langdon Park school area murder, stabbing, Ajmal Ahmad. And Ohid Ahmad said to me that he and Lutfur Rahman and the regime didn't involve themselves with the gangs. If Ohid Ahmad disagrees with this, then let him contact me by direct message and tell me that he disagrees. And if he does, then tell me that he didn't say what I have just said and I have said before as his response. Because he did. And quite apart from my independent investigative fact-finding efforts, Ohid Ahmad has never issued a statement about any of these victims. And he hasn't, to this time that I'm broadcasting this at just 12 minutes to 11 local time in the UK, he has not issued a statement about Shamima Begum or the other 3 girls, and what, in the context of what the Tower Hamlets Council's duties to these girls were during the years that Ohid Ahmad was in places on the Lutfur Rahman fronted cabal of bogus cabinet members. I say cabal and I say cabinet members, bogus cabinet members, or cabinet members in the bogus cabal or cabal of Lutfur Rahman fronted cabal, whatever the formation. The fact is that Lutfur Rahman fronted a cabal called the cabinet, and they had no say. They only had the say when the say could refer to or included references to unfounded and non-existent claims that Lutfur Rahman was the one that had invented democracy. local councils, accountability, all the rest of it. As we have said before, a conservative MP from the southeast of England and a former practicing licensed law trader, barrister called Robert Neil, initiated a debate at the beginning of January or during January 2013 under the auspices of the House of Commons. Although the actual debate took place maybe in another building, but it was a House of Commons initiative made by Robert or Bob Neal. And the topic of the debate was the role of the local councils monitoring officers. And because of that, Robert Neal focused quite a few minutes of his time to diagnosing the role played by Isabella Freeman. Isabella Freeman was in post, had been in post for quite a number of years as Tower Hamlets Council's head of legal or monitoring officer. As I've said before, I have very long recollections of very lengthy demands to Isabella Freeman and about Isabella Freeman, and my persistent, consistent, accurate, factual references to her as a liar, as a racist, etc. So Isabella Freeman was in effect sacked by the Slough Borough Council after it was discovered that she had been conducting a racist campaign of harassment against an Asian member of the staff she was close to. That is to say, her line management was close to. When it was found that she had lied and she had invented and fabricated a number of allegations, she had to resign, and she did resign. So it's an amazing event that somebody of that kind of record was considered by whoever appointed Isabella Freeman as the staff in the legal section, whatever the post she was initially given. It showed that Tower Hamlets Council didn't do rigorous research about Isabella Freeman, or that it did and it found that because of her racism and criminal behavior and record, Isabella Freeman beat all the others in the kind of race for that job, because that showed that she was that bad. And the appointment showed that they were looking for somebody who was the worst, not the best. And it goes on. The list is very, very long. And in that debate, remember why we are referring to Bob Neal and Isabella Freeman. Bob Neal said two things. One is that Isabella Freeman was hounding any critic of Lutfur Rahman, and he mentioned Peter Golds, the Conservative councillor, and Andrew Gilligan as the people being hounded by Isabella Freeman on behalf of Lutfur Rahman. Now, as Bob Neal said, and as the two others have said themselves, and as the objective evidence shows, the harassment of Andrew Gilligan and Peter Golds by Isabella Freeman was directly a function, a result of her agreement to commit illegalities in order to serve the interests of Lutfur Rahman, the illegal interest of Lutfur Rahman. And the other thing that Bob Neal actually referred to was that although attending the council meetings, Lutfur Rahman refused to speak at council meetings, let alone answer questions that were addressed to him or the post holder in the mayor post. And the explanation given by Isabella Freeman was that if Lutfur Rahman actually spoke, then he would lose his human rights, or he risked his human rights to be damaged by his answering the questions. Again, this is unspeakably corrupt and criminal and dishonest. And it's totally, absolutely not in keeping with the duties of the post. And so therefore there is a very comprehensive list of wrongs, illegalities done by the executive mayor of Tower Hamlets. And that list covers all the 6 years, all the 6 years of the 6 calendar years of Lutfur Rahman's incumbency. Against such an illegal operative imposed the monitoring officer, such as Isabella Freeman, it is absolutely out of the question that she would have bothered to monitor what the council is doing to safeguard the children, like the 4 girls from Bethnal Green School. And Lutfur Rahman is not on the record, and there is no record that can be found to show that Lutfur Rahman did his job, that he was obliged to do under the safeguarding children duties. And there is no evidence that Isabella Freeman even mentioned these 4 girls or the safeguarding children. So the list is absolutely endless. And of course, we have talked earlier about the role of John Biggs in making excuses for the Ian McArdle School appointing the convicted racist killer of Shibli Rahman and other illegalities by John Biggs. So Tower Hamlets Council, as a local council, on the evidence, has been doing wrongs, committing crimes. And the highlight of these, in the current context, is that these 4 girls' lives have been destroyed by Tower Hamlets Council. And the destruction was the target for the safeguarding duties, that the lives should be saved or safeguarded, not destroyed. Now, why is this so important? It's important for the whole community, and it's important for those 4 girls. And in that frame, we are not talking about the actual details of the various court cases that have taken place about Shamima Begum concerning her kind of rights, both before she became an adult and since she became an adult. Not that we don't want to discuss that, but that is separate from the Tower Hamlets Council's behavior. That is, of course, evidence and consequence of what wrongs the Tower Hamlets Council did by neglecting their duties. But Tower Hamlets Council is not being confused with the courts, and the courts are not being confused with Tower Hamlets Council. In the last 48 hours, we have discussed the various items of references to the role of these Sisters Forum and the others unidentified, but located in the entry about Sharmina Begum, as published and retrieved from the internet, published by the Wikipedia website. And we have also said that there is no reference to this concept of safeguarding duties owed to the 4 girls by Town Council in any of the known and accessible outlets operated in the name of the UK Bangladeshis in Tar Hamlets. And we, of course, refer to the likes of the so-called Channel S, a satellite outlet. That is the one that claims to be followed by the largest number of Bangladeshis in the UK. Even if that is the case, it doesn't prove that it has got the quality. And the others who are not as boastful of their supposed followers, a number of viewers, have been behaving in the same way. They are complicit with the propaganda being issued by the Home Office and against the rights of these girls. In fact, they have been silent about the safeguarding duties. They are focusing almost exclusively on borrowed third-hand kind of accounts against Shamima Begum as being issued by the UK Home Office. So when I say that the political entity of the UK Bangladeshis is something I created over the last 5 decades, I mean these kind of examples. And the A to Z of my work and the campaign that I've been doing is very long and very exclusive and very undeniable by the evidence, not because I'm saying it. And so therefore the campaign for justice for these 4 girls is absolutely the logical campaign that we have to do, because none of the others will ever do that and will never do that. And these girls have been done injustice to, and they deserve justice. And I said to John Biggs to make a statement saying what he has done and making a statement as to why he hasn't done anything to help these girls. And I'm saying the same to the thing to the councillors, elected councillors in Tar Hamlets, the Bangladeshi ones first. Why have they been silent about the rights of these children? What do they think they would have lost if they had made a public statement, publicly demanding answers to our questions from John Biggs and the rest of the kind of full-time employed staff in Tar Hamlets Council? So these are the questions that are beginning of the tip of the iceberg, and we shall continue asking these questions and giving the factual, contextual updates. As to the campaign to say vote no to the mayor post at the 6th of May 2021 election, we have said many things in favor of why there should be no elected mayor post and that people should actually vote no to the elected mayor post. The new thing is many of the people who are apparently campaigning now for an end to the elected mayor system, apparently, are criticizing the mayor system and saying they want people to vote no to the mayor system. Then slip in, that is SLIP, quickly, craftily, cunningly, include a contradictory statement saying that the Townless Council, which is lumbered with the mayor system now, they don't say lumbered, I'm saying it. The Townless Council, which has got an elected mayor now, has been repairing the damage done by the previous administration, by which the mean Lutfur, by the current mayor, John Beeks. Now that is completely stupid because they are contradicting their alleged opposition to the mayor system by saying anything in praise of John Beeks. And the reason they are contradicting, or the reason why I say that is a contradiction, is because Beeks has done nothing that could not have been done by Townless Council being a leader-led council, or a council that is operated without an elected mayor being the chief executive. So again, we shall be updating on the later kind of utterances by them, but the essential warning to them from me is that don't waste your time and don't mislead the electors by saying this kind of thing. You don't have a duty to praise John Beeks. Full stop. And you will sink the cause of removing that post if you keep behaving like a stooge for John Beeks. During the calendar years from October 2010 up to the 23rd of April 2015, Lutfur Rahman operated a two-faced kind of operation while he was incumbent in the post of mayor, at the expense of democracy, expense of the community. Lutfur Rahman organized a meal during the month of Ramadan, I think. And I went there prepared with my own fasting, breaking the fast meal. And I was outside of the center where that kind of iftar party was being organized. In the Mile End Road. And I was taking pictures in the main road of the people outside the building. There were more people inside, but there were quite a few people milling around before the iftar azan, and they were milling around and talking to one another outside the building. And one of the Siloti-speaking employees in Lutfur Rahman's kind of mayor administration approached me outside in the main road, in the Mile End Road. And he said to me that I could not take pictures because it was a gathering or a crowd that belonged to the council. Now that was not just stupid, but that was indescribably stupid and idiotic. So I said to him that I would continue to take the pictures, and it was absolutely lawful and legal. He went, and Alibor Chaudhary appeared in front of me. I'm still in the Mile End Road. And as he had done so often, he kind of came across as if he was pleading with me to go inside and join the main crowd. And I told Alibar Chaudhry that I had no intention of going to join the main crowd because I never knowingly have eaten at a public feast or meal without satisfying myself that the meal has been paid for correctly and lawfully and morally. And I wasn't sure that this meal was going to be correct or legal or lawful. But Alibar Chaudhry would not let go. He kept pleading with me to go inside. As I approached the main entrance, I found Lutfur Rahman standing there at the entrance with other people. And Lutfur Rahman made an absolutely unforgivably stupid assertion to me when I told him what was going on. He said, Baddevka. Now, Lutfur Rahman has no right to ever have assumed that he could tell me Baddevka. That showed his contemptible unfitness to even speak to me. I never said anything that he or anyone else in the community could say warranted my being told to Baddevka. I left that spot and I came back to the place in Myland Road and I continued taking pictures. But that behavior by Lutfur Rahman summed up for me that this was worse than I had predicted. That this boy was totally, contemptibly, outrageously unfit for any office in the name of the community. Now I am hearing that he says that he never did any wrong. That was wrong. I took my food with me. Does the boy realize now what that meant? Nobody else brought their meal with them for the fasting, breaking of the fast. So, the fact that somebody of Lutfur Rahman's offensive description could be installed in that post of executive mayor makes the case completely. It is open to being taken over and hijacked by the likes of him. And that can be only bad news for the community. Absolutely bad news for the community. And for that reason, I would say that anyone who is claiming to be campaigning against the mayor system should think very deeply about the impact and the consequences, bad consequences for the community collectively. Because Lutfur Rahman said to me, Baddevka, because he idiotically forgot where he was. He thought he was on a plane on a level that was higher than mine, and that he could tell me to drop it because he was not accountable to me. Well, he wasn't accountable to me because I never voted for the elected mayor, of course, and I opposed it and I oppose it. But he was accountable to a higher court, not Richard Morris, but to a higher court, which gave the verdict long before Mori declared his verdict against Lutfur Rahman on the 23rd of April 2015. And that verdict is the moral verdict, the ordinary people's verdict. And the verdict that ordinary people will still remember. Long after Lutfur Rahman biologically has passed away, finished. The notoriety and the scandal and the disgrace associated with all the allegations against him will outlive him and any of his descendants because he was unfit. As Muhammad Ali, a man who lives in the vicinity of the Christian Street Mosque, told me months after the so-called election in which Lutfur Rahman was installed in October 2010, Muhammad Ali is somebody who is known to have worked significantly to get the votes delivered for Lutfur Rahman in the October 2010 election. Muhammad Ali volunteered the information to me. I didn't ask him, and I wouldn't have known unless he told me it himself. He said that Bhai Sahab, that is older brother or whatever, I did all this work for him to get the people to turn up at the polls and the polling booths and massively vote for him. And after the election, and then Muhammad Ali added a couple of lines of abuse and swear words against Lutfur Rahman, including swear words against Lutfur Rahman's family. I didn't know Lutfur Rahman's family at all. But Muhammad Ali said that he knew his background and whatever, and he gave a string of 2 lines or 3 lines of abuse against Lutfur Rahman. And he said, after he got elected, so-called, he stopped answering my calls. That was early on. That was like maybe January or something, or February, whatever. Not long after the election of the so-called election of October 2010. And look, Muhammad Ali said that I'm not going to support him. And he is showing his, and he said a number of abusive words. Now, Muhammad Ali had known me not because we come from the same parts of Silot, but he had known me at that time for at least more than 20 years as the campaigner for the community. A campaigner of unique engagement and effectiveness. So he thought that I would be correct person to be given what he thought was the truth about Lutfur Rahman. Unfit for the support of the community. This is wrong. This was his Lutfur Rahman behaving wrongly towards Muhammad Ali. Now, during the year before the Richard Morey ruling against Lutfur Rahman, as I said, Lutfur Rahman behaved illegally, broke the codes and broke the council's codes and everything. When he held a meeting, allegedly to discuss the wrongs that had been done by the council and its employees, and the meeting didn't have anyone from the council's employed staff. The meeting had this individual employee of the Channel S called Muhammad Jubair, this other individual called Abu Tahir alias Kalam Chowdhury, and a couple of others who had nothing to do with the council as employees or as responsible people. So this was a brazen illegality that Lutfur Rahman should be prosecuted for. And this was something I witnessed, let's say, put it mildly. Now it follows that he did hundreds, if not more, similar illegalities. During the 6 calendar years. One of the most outrageous illegalities and stupidities that Lutfur Rahman did was to employ as advisor this Muhammad Jubair and to pay him hundreds of thousands of pounds. Now, the way I have put it may sound as if I am using these kind of expressions because I haven't got the better expressions. That's not the case. The details of the impact, implication, and the illegalities of Lutfur Rahman paying any money to Muhammad Jubair are so shocking and so extensive and so warranting the fullest possible attention by anyone watching the program. For that reason, all these details will be made available separately. When there are only 2 conservative councillors and town hamlets. So when one of them, the more racist and anti-Muslim one of the 2, Peter Goulds, took the world's most anti-Muslim white woman writer, Katie Hopkins, on a tour of Brick Lane area during 2015. I don't think he or Katie Hopkins had any idea that they would be seen by the most unexpected of witnesses. That is me. And the fact that I am calling it unexpected is linked with their behavior. When they saw me see them, or when they saw me that I had noticed them, I had spotted them, Peter Goulds literally ran towards a parked car in the Deal Street off Hanbury Street. And he was followed very fast by Katie Hopkins. And within seconds, they left the area at a speed that the Star Trek ship would travel at. Why the nervousness? I only saw them. I wasn't going to criticize them for being there. I would have commented on them. But the fact that Peter Goulds and Katie Hopkins ran was nothing to do with me. It was to do with them, because they didn't want to be seen by anyone in the area, least of all a campaigner of my description and record, because that would only prove that they were genuinely engaged in cooking up anti-Muslim evidence. The reason why Peter Goulds brought Katie Hopkins into Tower Hamlets and Brick Lane area was to show that the Bangladeshi Muslims had actually taken over. And the location of their kind of existence at the time that I spotted them was outside the court, outside the church that is in the Deal Street. And there was the only other people there were about 3 or 4 other conservatives. It's not an area where people from Brick Lane actually congregate or walk about or whatever. This is not a literally a part of Brick Lane culture or anything or community. It's in the back yard of Brick Lane, let's say. But by the time I saw Peter Golds and Katie Hopkins was probably coming to an end of their little tour. So I don't know how much of the actual Brick Lane they had been walking through. Even if they walked through Brick Lane, there wouldn't be many people who would recognize even Peter Golds, let alone Katie Hopkins. I'm the one who would, but there is nobody else who would. And I'm the one who spotted another operative, a joint propaganda operation run by the most ardent anti-Muslim agencies and Fleet Street, is a man who claims to be a Muslim, but actually an agent of the propaganda against Muslims. One day, in the corner of Quaker Street and Brick Lane, I was standing there, or I was walking past there or something, and I saw this operative, because I had seen him on television programs, all of which were dedicated programs created to invent an image of the ordinary Muslims as being part of the radical threat to the West. And they obviously kind of identify Brick Lane population as part of the threat to the Western security. But the reality of the Brick Lane population is the opposite. Most of the people even don't know who is who and what is going on. They don't read newspapers. And they don't read newspapers, I mean literally, and they don't know anything about British politics. They are almost all of them, politically are tuned to what is going on in Dhaka in Bangladesh. But that's not acknowledged or even known or understood by the British mainstream racists and anti-Muslims who want to find a physical location in British urban areas which they can definitively identify as being the geographical area where Muslim radicals are undergoing training and brainwashing and whatever. So I find this particular Mir Zafar and liar standing on the northern side of Quaker Street, while on the opposite side is a white man with a camera. And this one is an Asian with a Muslim name, but he's a complete Mir Zafar and traitor. So the minute I saw him, I challenged him to explain why he was there. I said that Brick Lane is the wrong place. And I called him all kinds of things. And then I followed him to a shop in Brick Lane itself, continuing to ask him the question that he was a traitor and he was a liar and he was a part of the propaganda targeted against the Bangladeshis because they're Muslims and so on, but not doing anything wrong, the Bangladeshis. And this criminal has been a part and parcel of the regular number of crooks that appear on BBC and other security-related documentaries. Not long after that, he was doing a program including a number of shots that he filmed in Saudi Arabia, and it was broadcast on the BBC. So when I saw the Katie Hopkins and Peter Golds, I saw this same kind of thing. And over the last 5 decades, I have been doing the same kind of thing, noticing completely criminally engaged activities that are geared to creating an image of the Bangladeshis around Brick Lane. I mean, by using the location of Brick Lane as the geographical focus as a breeding ground of Islamic terrorists and radicals and whatever. There is no evidence whatsoever. I have not seen any evidence whatsoever of any radical terrorist or whatever. But that is the hope and the expectation of the anti-Muslim policymakers and strategists and propagandists operating in this country and through this country. By that I mean the USA and other foreign countries that use the UK as a breeding ground for anti-Muslim inventions and propaganda. Which is why when these girls were discovered as having crossed into Syria, in addition to the other people's ordinary reaction, I had these additional recollections. And I said, oh my God, I mean, these girls of all places, they have found these girls in Tower Hamlets of all places, and not very far from Brick Lane, which is where Peter Gold's and this other one I had encountered in the recent past or not long before. I mean, the differences between time of Peter Gold's appearance and these girls is not few months, more than few months. But the other one was before the girls, I mean, even were known about. So when I read about these girls crossing into Syria through Turkey, I thought about that other one in Quaker Street, because the encounter with Peter Golds and Katie Hopkins happened after these girls had crossed into Syria. But similar things I have been aware of. Many dozens of media people with cameras coming into the Whitechapel Road and focusing on the complex, the East London Mosque complex. Now, I have not been a part of the East London Mosque, whatever, but generally my reading is that they are targeting the community. And they're using this as a symbol, as a kind of building that they can say that this is part of the community that has got radicals and whatever breeding in it. The role of the East London Mosque, as the entry on Sharmina Begum shows, is the opposite. They are actually doing the opposite in that they are being patronized by the Kate Middleton and Wilson, others who visit them. But under these covers, the East London Mosque is doing dual policy and so on. So I have nothing to do with the East London Mosque or anything, any of the bodies that operate from there. But I have, from the outside, generally prevented the image of the East London Mosque from distortion, and distortion kind of done by media and various television crews and whatever. And in Trafalgar Square, other parts of London, I have confronted suspicious security-based propaganda outlets that are filming Muslims in the main street. For example, at gatherings at the Trafalgar Square, I have found the people coming from very far away from the UK, like many locations in the USA, are trying to film Muslims gathering and use those images to distort the kind of truth and wrongly refer to the Muslims as being involved in radicalization or whatever, which is not the case. Which is not the case to this day, as far as I know. So my duty is to tell them to stop lying and stop distorting the image of the Muslims. I would do the same thing if they were doing that against the Sikhs or the Hindus or other ordinary people of other faiths. So when this news came that these girls were able, whatever reason, they were able to cross into Syria. My question was, what was the council doing? And the answer was that the council was either asleep or couldn't be bothered or was complicit. And in the last, let's say the last year since Lutfur Rahman was ousted, the elected mayor post has been given to John Biggs. And Biggs, upon taking the post, which he did on the 11th of June 2015, did one thing that stands out even now as the behavior of a crook and a liar. He is, of course, a racist, but he is a crook and a liar as well, and I'll develop this example. Anyone who knows the area, Shoreditch, the trendy Shoreditch, where today's Sunday Mirror publishes the admission by Jennifer Arcuri that she had a 4-year relationship with Johnson and she had sex with him in a flat in Shoreditch or not far from there during his second term in the post of London mayor. So near there is the micro business center. Sorry, not micro business center. Reach Miss Center. Right? Micro business center is in the Greater Extradies. This one is Reach Mixed Center or Reach Mix Center. And I have renamed it the Reach Mess Center. This center was kind of launched with its directors being the former councillor, timeless councillor, and sometimes leader, Michael Keith, who I call Michael Crook, and Una King, and mostly a number of white others. This is a corruption center. And I think Denise Jones is also involved because of her illicit relationship with Michael Crook. Now, this center was given a few million pounds of Timeless Council's money during the time when Michael Crook and Denise Jones were among the councillors on the council, wielding significant power, because Michael Crook was probably the leader at the time or a leading member of the council. And the claim in justification for the council's involvement in the launching and funding of the Reach Mass Center was a statement attributed to Denise Jones, whose claim was so brazenly, nakedly stupid and matronizing and racist and untruthful that I'll paraphrase it here because I haven't got the actual quotation in front of me. She said the Rich Mix Center, the Rich Mess Center, would be the playground for the boys from the nearby council estate. It never was going to be that, because it is beyond the reach of the boys from the nearby council estate, for a start. But that statement by Denise Jones, an idiot, showed her own stupidity and ignorance. Although she had lived in Tower Hamlets and parasited at the expense of the community for too long, she had never understood the community and most certainly never identified with the community. And she never lived the life of the people in the council estates. So this Reach Mess Center became a mess, and it incurred millions of pounds of debts. And the first thing John Biggs did, after being installed as the corrupt holder of the corrupt post of elected mayor, was to write off the millions of debts that this Reach Mess Center owed the public in the form of the local Tower Hamlets Council. Now, anyone who knows about councils' corruption and council's finances and the council's role in creating poverty, homelessness, and other wrongs and other deficits and other detriments and other damages would know that to write off any amount by a council was a lethal mistake, an error. But Biggs did that, and none of the councillors elected councillors in post at the time did anything to oppose what Biggs did. And so one of the questions that has not been answered about any councils is, why is it that there is no campaign to compel and make it compulsory for every council to publish the full accounts publicly every year? Because if that happened, most of the councils would be untenable because of the habitual corruption and criminality that they actually indulge in. And this actually relates to councils creating poverty. Say 5-6 million pounds written off. Even 1,000 pounds cannot be written off. Even 100 pounds cannot be written off. Guess what? When council tenants are evicted because of rent arrears, think about it. They are being evicted for owing rent arrears, allegedly, of 100 pounds. Think about that. So it's not a complicated nuclear science level of complexity to understand that John Biggs abused the post of elected mayor by causing thousands of homelessness cases by that writing off of the debt owed by the Reach Mess Center alone. Think about that. And this criminal cannot face any genuine questions, as we have posted today on the Twitter and things, as updated narrative. Not new facts about him altogether, but updated narrative and contextual updating. And there is nothing on the council's website about Shamima Begum, Sharmina Begum, or any of the 4 girls that Tower Hamlets Council betrayed the duty of care and safeguarding to. we go back to the issue of the Batley, West Yorkshire school on the day, Mail on Sunday, today, carries several pieces against the parent protesters and the Imam in bold in kind of featuring as the campaigners' supporter. And the Mail on Sunday is focusing on the fact that, they're saying that the teacher who has been suspended after being found to have distributed the kind of bogus cartoon against the Prophet of Islam, Muhammad, peace be on him, is actually a very popular person in the local area. And Muslim neighbors praise him. Now, these same Muslim neighbors have never would have been mentioned by the Mail on Sunday or any equivalent in West Yorkshire in Batley, equivalent news outlet so-called. So it's a dishonest acknowledgement of the existence of these people as human beings, let alone having any opinion about a school teacher worthy of being reported. So that is the kind of dishonesty of racism and anti-Muslim hysteria. For a very long time, I've been campaigning on the question of education. What constitutes education? And I started campaigning long before I arrived in the UK. And education, of course, the word education is used too loosely and too readily without establishing the actual identity of education and the purpose. And it is often confused with bureaucracy, with brainwashing, with indoctrination and all the rest of it. Education is not indoctrination. In fact, education, by definition, in my view, is the opposite of indoctrination. It's enlightenment, independent and adequate research and investigation of the facts and the evidence. That is why I don't accept the definition of education attaching to the Oxbridge or the Russell Group or their equivalents, either here or the counterparts of corresponding institutions in North America, for example, Harvard, MIT, Yale, whatever, and in other parts of the world. And I've been telling the Secretary General of the United Nations, current one, I did the previous ones as well for a long time, many of them. Especially I focused on the disgrace called Boutros Ghali from Egypt, a most corrupt individual in post as the Secretary General of the United Nations. But not just Boutros Ghali. I'm not impressed by any of them. And the victim of the plane crash sabotage, in which the United Nations Secretary General was murdered, it took place before I started engaging in the monitoring of the United Nations. I have been monitoring the United Nations generally, but not with the kind of frequency and the in-depth attention that I've been having to pay for the last 30 years. the murder of the first, or the murder of the United Nations Secretary Dag Hammarskjöld, the Swedish man, diplomat, of course, is correctly referred to as an attack on the United Nations ideas. I accept that. But then I ask the question, those who say that have the duty to campaign for the ideals of the founding ideals of the United Nations to be practiced. How many of them have been doing that? That is my question. And the answer is absent. And the answer is absent because Boutros Ghali was an Egyptian crook, as was his predecessor and the successors, whatever. And this current one, the one who was an kind of opportunist prime minister in Portugal, where he's unduly overly celebrated. This one is a lying preacher man. He issues every day around the clock through the United Nations propaganda outfits all kinds of banal slogans. We don't need preaching by him. The world doesn't need banality from the United Nations. The world needs action and audit. Now the criminal liars who issue these banalities sidetrack and pass the main failures of the United Nations. For example, Myanmar is a case in point. The so-called coup that is ongoing now in Burma, as we have been saying, is being used as a topic to divert attention from the crimes against humanity and the genocide crimes that were committed by the regime that Aung San Suu Kyi headed. Not only did Aung San Suu Kyi head that regime, she then left no doubt in the minds of the observers that she supported the genocide after she denied it, and then she justified attacking the Rohingyas because she claimed that the Rohingyas were a terrorist kind of controlled group. They were not. They are not. When repeated massacres were taking place of the Rohingyas, they had to organize the defense. That is not the same thing as terrorists. That was a defense. Accepted, recognized, clearly, explicitly, legally defined by many protocols and declarations and statements of the United Nations itself. So what we shall be doing is continuing on all these topics in the due course.